Welcome to Connected with Eva. Today I'm thrilled to have Dr. Andrea Matsumura, the sleep goddess MD, with us. She's a sleep medicine expert, helping women reclaim deep, rejuvenating sleep and the creator of the Dream Sleep Method. We'll explore how sleep impacts our energy, mood, and lives. Dr. Matsumura, welcome to the podcast. Is sleep the worst now it's ever been?
People are really having problems with their sleep now because we have too much light in our life. That's what I like to say. We have too many devices and just too much light, generally speaking, in our society. And so then it has shortened our sleep time by at least 30 minutes. And everybody goes to bed with their device. It's rare when people say, I don't bring my phone into my bed, and that causes people to stay awake longer than they should. And then the light actually tells your brain to stay awake longer.
I mean, I do that as well. And I'm thinking, I wonder if there is like a correlation between having our phone right next to us and the brain thinking that there's always something to do, that kind of urgency. Because, for example, when I go to bed at night and I have my phone next to me, which is not good, I'll be like, okay, so, email, I need to reply to this email. Oh, I need to write this reminder for myself tomorrow. And that's because my phone is there.
Right.
Is that a psychological thing or a brain thing?
Absolutely, because your phone is just a mini computer. If we were going to bed next to our computers, that pull to want to work would be there. Oh, I have this email. It's so close. You don't think about that. If your laptop or your computer desk is in a completely different room, you don't think about that. But because it's just so easy to reach for, people tend to not know how to turn it off anymore.
I feel so seen with that because I have such big problems when it comes to sleeping. I find it very difficult to fall asleep. And there are certain issues they're quite common. For example, there's the incessant thought process that happens when you go to bed and your brain just starts being overactive. Also, the worst case scenario situations where you suddenly think of all the problems that you might have or you might not have. So it's like this doomsday theater happening in front of you almost. I know some people say they don't have that, so they touch the pillow and they fall asleep, and I'm like, I hate you. Because that's not me. I cannot. Sometimes it'll be hours. And then if the thoughts persist and I don't make them go away, then sometimes it gets so bad that maybe it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm still not asleep.
All the tools to teach ourselves how to relax and get to sleep, they live in the brain already. And what we have done as a society is we have turned those signals off. We've lost the concept of winding down and stopping all that daytime brain activity. And so then people bring that into their bed and then they don't know how to turn it off. Then this anticipatory anxiety to try to fall asleep, it becomes part of your routine and you cannot then turn your brain off. So typically what I have people do is I have people develop a ritual for helping themselves shut down and kind of power down and be able to get into bed and fall asleep. The second piece is really identifying what your circadian rhythm, or what I call sleep archetype, is. So sleep archetype is a term that I coined that discusses the different types of circadian rhythms that people live by. We are born with clock genes in our brain, and we're set for either being an early bird, a night owl, or kind of falling into our societal norm. And if you tend to be a night owl, you will feel as though you have insomnia because you'll try to get into bed earlier and then you cannot fall asleep and you have all of these thoughts and your brain is basically telling you, why are we in bed? I'm not ready to fall asleep. A night owl, by definition, is somebody who wants to fall asleep at 12 p.m. or later and wake up at 8 a.m. or later. 20% of the world's population is a night owl, 1 in 5 people. Many people then develop insomnia on top of a delayed circadian rhythm because they develop all of this hypervigilance in their sleep because they have trouble falling asleep. They finally fall asleep, and it's as though they're sleeping with one eye open because they don't want to miss waking up when they have to wake up in the morning.
How can you find out which one you are?
So a very simple tool that I use is a sleep diary. And I take a look at somebody's sleep pattern for 2 weeks. And you can really find out a lot of information with the sleep diary. Another component is just asking somebody, when do you get into bed versus when do you fall asleep? Typically, people who have circadian rhythm misalignment will finally fall asleep. It can be hours later, but once they fall asleep, they stay asleep. Most insomniacs tend to have lots of frequent awakenings.
It makes me think of this very popular idea that people say it's healthy to go to bed early and wake up early, right? That's quite a common idea.
It's trendy, okay, because there are all of these components around being more efficient and being able to get so much more done in the morning. But not everyone is an early bird. Nobody has studied if following your natural circadian rhythm is better than just pushing yourself to go to bed earlier. So what we find in the sleep world is that when people actually can follow their true circadian rhythm, they do better. It's all about what your internal rhythm is. Let me give you an example. There are societies in Europe who tend to run later. Italy, France, Spain, they're eating dinner a lot later. They're going to bed a lot later. They have that, Spain has that built-in middle of the day where they close everything. That is actually a way to recover some of the lack of sleep. You have to really figure out what your brain is telling you, what society is, how it's impacting you. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but I think that people are better off following their natural circadian rhythm that they're born with, the clock genes in their brain that they're born with, because that is the pacemaker for all of your cells, because every cell runs on a circadian rhythm. So if your pacemaker is set for 1 a.m. to 9 a.m., why would we want to adjust that? Now, let me qualify that with saying that many people have jobs in the world where they have to go to bed early. There is a way to actually fake out your circadian rhythm and pull your clock, and we call that advancing it, so that you can go to bed earlier and you can wake up earlier without this symptom of lying in bed awake for hours with getting little sleep. Especially, I live in the Northwest of the United States, and lots of people tend to have delayed sleep phase. And I believe it is because we spend a lot of time in darkness, and then we spend an exorbitant amount of time in bright light for about 90 days. So I think that the wide excursion in nighttime and wake time actually affects people's circadian rhythm, and people tend to become night owls more so in this part of the country.
And is there such a thing as the importance of sleep during certain hours of the night? Another thing that I keep hearing, how certain times it's really important, and that's when you have your deep sleep. And also you should be in bed before this time because that's most beneficial to the body or the brain.
It's really the amount of quality sleep that you're achieving so that you can then achieve all of the stages of sleep. So there isn't a particular hour that you should be in bed. Some people have to wake up at 3 a.m. Some people have to wake up at 4 a.m. The biggest piece is making sure that you have high quality and quantity. Sometimes, though, as long as you're getting high quality, you don't necessarily have to get all of the quantity. That's a fine line because you need to have enough percentages of each sleep stage to feel like you've achieved high quality sleep. So that's really the key. The key is getting enough deep sleep, which is called slow wave sleep or N3 sleep, and then achieving enough REM sleep. Those two are the two most important stages of sleep. N3 sleep is our most restorative sleep, where we release growth hormone, we're repairing, we're rebuilding, helping ourselves get ready for the next day. And then REM sleep is really around emotional regulation.
Are there certain supplements? What is something that's very easy and people maybe don't use it enough or super accessible?
There hasn't been a lot of data around what are these drivers of sleep that can be affected with aging. And so then there's this controversy. Well, is this the normal aging process? And what I'm speaking about is melatonin. So melatonin is released from the pineal gland, which is housed in the hypothalamus of the brain. By the time we hit age 50, we have lost up to 50% of our melatonin production. Melatonin is what sets our circadian rhythm, which allows us to actually fall asleep, get into the right sleep stages, and then wake up. You have a lot of elderly people or people who are in the second half of their life saying, well, I'm aging. That's why I don't sleep well. I'm not supposed to sleep well. I'm supposed to wake up all of the time. And there's a lot of disruption in what we call sleep architecture. That's, true if you abide by the thinking that as I age, I have less melatonin production. I'm going to have more fragmentation of sleep. That can be a big source of then other medical issues. For people, generally speaking, we want to maintain our quality, the highest quality we can maintain for as long as we're on this planet. And so I really think that there is this room to supplement with melatonin, sustained release as we age. The thing about melatonin is that again, it's a circadian rhythm regulator. It is not a sleep aid. So it is sold, at least in the United States, over the counter as a sleep aid. That's not how it works in our body. Many times people will say, oh, I've tried melatonin, it doesn't work. And it's because they take it at bedtime. And that's not how it works in our body. We release melatonin from the pineal gland about 4 hours before we actually fall asleep. It's a timer. So it starts the process of getting us to sleep. So I generally recommend people take melatonin if they're taking a supplement, exogenous supplement, to take it 2 hours before they want to fall asleep. There is some data out there that shows that anywhere between 1 to 3 milligrams of sustained release melatonin 2 hours before bed allows people to actually have that sustained sleep with less middle of the night awakenings over time. That ultimately improves your quality of life because you're getting into the right sleep stages. You're achieving the amount of deep sleep and REM sleep you should be achieving to have a high quality life. There's not enough data out there, and it is a hormone. But the more I dive deep into the literature, which there isn't a whole lot of, the more I'm convinced that this is a hormone that needs much more extensive studying. I really think that it is potentially the next vitamin D. So if people remember how all of a sudden vitamin D became this hormone that everyone should be taking, because melatonin does more than just sleep regulation. There was a study that just came out that it helps with cardiac remodeling. It also is an immune modulator. It does a lot of things in the body.
That's so interesting because, like you just mentioned, vitamin D, that's only a new thing, right? It wasn't popular however many years ago. And now everybody's like, check your vitamin D levels because, it's important for bones, for the body, for everything.
Melatonin has a lot of receptors all over the body as well. And so it's just not been researched. And so, our tendency globally is to hang our hats on evidence and research that's out there. And that's a whole nother, what I like to say, ball of wax, because, there hasn't been a whole lot of research on women. Most research studies are done on men. And then it gets translated to, oh, well, we'll just treat women the same way. And we're different. We're different humans. We have different physiology.
I saw somewhere recently, it said that women need more sleep than men. It was one of the first mentions of an actual difference, right, in sleep needs
Yeah.
between men and women. It shouldn't be shocking. We're different.
It harkens back to the inception of how medicine was born and the fact that there's a lot of patriarchy ingrained into medicine, and the notion that women needed to be studied just didn't exist. We were too complicated. We menstruate. Our hormones fluctuate too much. Now we know that that's true, and that means that we have different physiology. That means that we may not present the same way with the same disease. We really need to focus on research dollars that really are studying women and different disease processes or different outcomes based on our physiology.
Talking about hormones, is there anything done on different sleep throughout the menstrual cycle over the period of that 1 month?
So estrogen and progesterone really are sleep promoting agents. Actually, they're sleep promoting hormones. And so when we menstruate, that second half of our cycle, we have this strong reduction in estrogen and progesterone, which then causes the menstrual cycle to start, right? Or menstruation rather to start. And in those few days right before we start menstruating, women tend to have insomnia. And that's because progesterone and estrogen are sleep promoting hormones. And when they reduce drastically and pretty sharply, that often will lead to a few days of insomnia for women.
I'm immediately thinking, is that also related to premenstrual mood swings? Because you're not getting sleep and these levels you mentioned are lower. I always have this before my period, and sometimes I don't know my period is coming. So then I'm like, okay, so this is why I was so grumpy. Right. Okay. That makes sense now.
Yes. And the same is true in the perimenopausal and menopausal state. We're having these wide fluctuations in estrogen. Estrogen modulates serotonin. Serotonin is a precursor to melatonin. So we have a lot of work to do on studying women's physiology and understanding the intimate role that estrogen plays in sleep homeostasis.
Talking about that, what's one thing that you can't wait to find out more about in that field? What's something that you're like, I really need more research into this yesterday because I want to know?
What I would love to see is more research done on the relationship between estrogen and melatonin production and how melatonin's role may be involved in our aging process. And I say that because 2/3 of all cases of dementia are in women. And there is a connection between estrogen reducing. There is a correlation. There's a big difference between correlation and causation.
Yeah.
There is data coming out that does show that estrogen plays this role. And I know that melatonin is one of those players in there. It just hasn't been studied. The party line, if you will, the reason for more women having dementia the thinking was that, well, we live longer, so then we see more rates of dementia in women. And that's not true. So that just is a perfect example of how we used male physiology, outcomes on men, and just tried to extrapolate logic on women's physiology. It kind of reminds me of all of the misinformation that's out there on social media around health and wellness. And, you can take a little nugget of truth and then just completely distort it into something that is not true, but people believe it.
What is something that you see, as you mentioned, on social media that's super popular and it's entirely untrue, or maybe just turned upside down from something that might have had a flicker of truth to begin with.
I will give you an example that is around sleep health and wellness. So there are so many sleep aids out there, and there are so many devices being invented out there that cure insomnia. There's no silver bullet that is going to cure insomnia. There's no sleep aid. There is no device that's going to cure insomnia. It is all about brain training. That's not to say that a sleep aid can't work in conjunction with cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. That's the brain training. But the core component to help your brain light up the neurological pathway that it needs to get to sleep and stay asleep is a process called cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is really all about harnessing the tools, again, that already exist in your brain and lighting up that pathway, strengthening those muscles to help you get to sleep and stay asleep. There's a whole host of medications out there that are saying that they're going to help people cure their insomnia, and that's not it. I myself am coming out with a sleep supplement, but it's more to help people with longevity and quality, right? It's not going to cure insomnia if you have insomnia. You want to use this supplement potentially along with cognitive behavioral therapy, but it is not going to be a supplement that cures insomnia. It's going to be a supplement that helps work in addition to all of the other things you're already doing.
What is the difference between actual insomnia and lack of sleep because you have anxiety or you're just thinking too much, which I probably have? Because people might confuse the two.
Yeah, well, it is confusing because chronic insomnia there's always a reason why you have chronic insomnia. So chronic insomnia is a condition, but there's an underlying symptom that's causing the insomnia. So it could be underlying anxiety that is causing the insomnia. It could be obstructive sleep apnea, disordered breathing that's causing the insomnia. It could be past trauma that you're reliving that is causing the insomnia. There is a diagnosis called idiopathic chronic insomnia. I have yet to find someone who has that. There is always a reason why they turned off that pathway. The key here is that when you treat the insomnia, which is through cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, you have to tailor that intervention to identify the underlying driver, and then you also treat that. Let's give the example of anxiety and insomnia. If you start cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia and you don't treat the anxiety at all, you're not going to get very far.
I had this assumption that maybe there was somewhat of a difference. Because sometimes, for example, I'll have good sleep and I'll have nights where I sleep very well, right? You need to be tired. You need to have used your brain during the day a lot. You need to be doing different activities. So there's actually a lot that needs to be happening for you to be able to sleep well, even in normal circumstances.
Generally speaking, yes, we do need to be building up what is called sleep pressure throughout the day. But actually just being awake and your brain firing off, your ability to reach for something, to eat, to walk, all of these are reactions that are happening, in the brain, interactions. And there's a waste product that gets built up called adenosine. And adenosine is what makes us sleepy. For some people, yes, they feel like I don't sleep as well when I am not active. Other people, it doesn't really matter. So it really just depends on you individually. Chronic insomnia is much more common, and I think some of it is behaviorally induced. The underlying driver could be that you play video games until 1 a.m. in the morning, and then you can't turn your brain off. Or you watch horror movies at night and then you wonder why you can't fall asleep. Or you're looking at the news.
I had a Gilmore Girls marathon a few weeks ago. And then I couldn't really sleep because I was thinking of all her romantic choices throughout. So that's self-inflicted. But it's also that addictive thing, right? About the brain. That kind of information, whether it's before bed or during the day, it's very addictive. So you want more and it's entertaining.
The dopamine release.
I have a question about dreams. Does everyone dream?
Yes, everyone does dream. You will not survive if you don't dream. You do not have to remember your dreams to know that you are dreaming. Simply by living, you know that you are dreaming. It's essential for life. You have to dream to live.
And why is it that some people don't remember their dreams and some people do? Is there a specific reason for it?
No, it's really just dependent on, if you woke up right after your dream and you were able to consolidate some of it. We don't really know the science behind why some people have very vivid dreams and can remember all of their dreams. Sometimes it can be medically induced. Sometimes it can be if you drink more or less, if you're using psychedelics. There's a lot of brain-altering chemicals that can affect your ability to remember.
Dreams always fascinate me so much. And obviously there's the anxiety thing as well. For example, I wake up quite a lot at night, and at night, I don't know the specific reason behind that, but I know one part of the brain was switched off or was sleeping. I'm not sure. So you were more inclined to be kind of depressed in a way at night. If you wake up, you have these worst case scenarios, which happens with me a lot. When morning comes, I'm like, oh, it's all good now because it's daytime and my brain is processing normally again. What is the reason behind that?
I guess when you're dreaming, that's when you're consolidating all the emotions of the day. There are reactions that are happening in the brain that are helping you consolidate all of this emotion and developing the emotional regulation for the next day. And so you may have something intense happening in your dream, but that's because it might be your brain working hard on consolidating the memories, regulating the emotion. And then when you wake up, you're back to baseline.
Sleep is such a fascinating subject because we need sleep. It's basically one of the most important things.
Basic physiology. I call it our CEO. It is our operating system, whatever you want to call it, your CEO or your operating system. But without sleep, we do not function. We are supposed to sleep a third of our life.
Do some people need less sleep than others?
The gender base is, give or take like 30 minutes. We're not talking hours. So the people who say, I don't need a lot of sleep, I get by on 5 hours, that's called compensation. That is fallacy. If we really want to get into the right stages of sleep, we should be achieving 7 to 9 hours of sleep most days. That's not to say that if you sleep 6.5 hours, you're going to be a total wreck, but people generally know when they're getting enough sleep and when they're not getting enough sleep. Having said that, we also compensate very well, and we sometimes do not listen to our body. And then we wonder why something else is not doing well in our life. It's generally because we're not getting enough sleep. So I see that a lot. People will say, something else is not working well in their life. And then we drill down and figure out that they're only getting, 5.5 hours to 6 hours of sleep. And when we try to increase their sleep time, even by 30 minutes, it makes a difference, because if you have an increase of 30 minutes of sleep times 7 days, that's quite a few hours. Times a month, that's a whole lot more time. Times a year, that's a lot more sleep time.
And what about interrupted sleep?
It depends, right? You have to qualify it. So if you're waking up every hour and then it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to fall back to sleep, then that's not helpful. But if you're waking up 1 or 2 times a night and you're going to the bathroom, you fall asleep right away, that's not going to be impactful.
I just find sleep so fascinating. What made you get into the sleep field?
Well, I was a practicing internal medicine doctor. That's basically a doctor for adults, right? And I was treating lots of chronic medical conditions, and almost everyone had trouble sleeping, and that this would be something that they would mention as they were walking out of the appointment. Then I started to do some research on sleep and how it is so clearly associated with how our physiology performs. So you can give people all the medication in the world, but if they're not getting enough sleep, then their cholesterol is not going to be as well controlled as it could be. Their arrhythmia is not going to be as well controlled. Their insulin levels are not going to be as well controlled. Their cortisol levels, everything hinges on our ability to get high quality sleep.
And tell me a bit more about the sleep method.
So I developed this method called the Dream Sleep Method, which basically is a holistic integrated approach to identifying all of the reasons why someone may have trouble sleeping, because generally it's not one thing. It's usually a couple of things at least that are affecting somebody's sleep. So the D stands for your daily habits and activities that may be affecting your ability to get to sleep. R is your resting environment. You really should be, developing this sanctuary for sleep if you can. E are emotions. We talked a little bit about that. Anxiety, depression, trauma. And then A is your archetype, or what is your circadian rhythm. M are medical conditions. So other medical conditions can greatly affect somebody's ability to get to sleep. Pain. Chronic pain can affect your ability to sleep. If you have heart failure, if you have dementia, if you have a neuromuscular disorder, if you have a hormonal imbalance.
What are some tricks we can do that are quite like small steps to help with sleep?
Yeah. So it's things that everybody has heard before. I don't know if people have trouble with the follow through, but it's super basic. It's getting into bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every day. It's giving yourself time to wind down. The example that I give for people is when we're hungry, we don't go, and then just open the refrigerator and start shoveling food in our mouth. We prepare food, right? We give ourselves time. Even if you go to a restaurant, you're sitting there for minutes at least, 15 minutes until your food comes. So you're subconsciously preparing yourself to eat. So we need to prepare ourselves to fall asleep. Regulating your time, same time in bed, same time out of bed, preparing yourself for sleep, really removing all of the electronics out of your bedroom or putting them in a nightstand, in a drawer, really getting rid of the electronics. The other one is try not to eat a heavy meal right before bed, keeping your room dark, cool, and quiet. These are some basic things. Surprisingly, people say, "Oh, I've tried that." And then when you really talk to them, they really haven't tried it.
They probably know it, and it's actually quite difficult sometimes to follow through because of the world we live in, because of how accessible information and distraction is. Have we actually tried within a certain period of time to do all these things?
Yes, tried it in earnest. Like, give yourself the opportunity to try all of the things for a good 2 weeks and see if you don't make some incremental change. And I always tell my patients, write down what you're trying to solve. Look back 2 weeks later and see if what you were trying to solve, if there's any movement in that direction. I think people really are looking for big changes, and it's the small incremental change and the consistency that really is the success.
And also big changes happen over time. It's a combination of small changes that become big over time. So you might not notice these things immediately, but if you don't do them, there won't be any changes happening.
I always say that sleep is the juggernaut for everything else to function better in your life. So it's just another way of saying that it's your CEO or your operating system. I'm actually coming out with a workbook and guide for chronic insomnia that is going to be on my website. It's different because you're going to be able to tailor it to your needs. It's not just a generic protocol. It's using the core principles of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, but with ability to tailor it to your needs so that you are in control and in the driver's seat of your own path.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.